With psychoanalysis, there starts therapeutic culture, which lastingly influences present-day Western world. Is it okay? Can you hear me? Okay. Most of all, the Frankfurt School attempted to show that both theory and practice of psychoanalysis aim at emancipation. For example, for Adorno, the evidence given by Freud to the fact that seemingly reasonable behavior may be unreasonable because the thus intended adjustment to social reality may result in psychic problems and illness is an indication of objectively existing unreason in the antagonistic society of late capitalism. Freud's greatness, he states, is in emphasizing these contradictions and in showing how they affect the individual's psyche. For Jürgen Habermas, Freud founded a science focusing on self-reflection and applying its methods. Only reflection by way of overcoming resistance is capable of neutralizing the power of repressions. Psychoanalysis is characterized by an emancipatory epistemic interest because it makes us aware of the unconscious, dissolves constraints which influence behavior and experiences, and thus attempts to extend the individual's scope of action. As the historian Elie Zaretsky states, Freud created, quotation, the first extended theory and practice of personal life. It demonstrated that in the modern age, the individual experiences singularity. Her subjectivity is determined by, quotation, personal, indeed, unmistakably stubborn meanings. End of quotation. Like the bourgeois novel, also psychoanalysis focuses on the individual. It makes a cult of the individual. Calling it revisionist, Adorno and Herbert Marcuse vehemently criticized the direction taken by psychoanalysis in the United States. For example, the so-called ego psychology, for which the emancipation from social constraints and impositions retreated to the back and the adjustment of the ego became the focus of interest. This change of perspective, however, was a precondition for psychoanalysis pushing through in the United States, thus becoming such a matter of course. This does not only hold for psychoanalysis as a method of psychotherapy, but also for the development and institutionalization of a psychoanalytically oriented kind of psychiatry with its hospitals and research centers of psychoanalytical professional associations of thus influence clinical psychology and those counseling and test methods as being determined by the latter. Even more astonishing than this institutional rooting in the field of medicine and psychology is how, as Peter Berger states, ideas going back to Freud have spread and pushed through in US American society. Quotation, Peter Berger, it is even more important that psychoanalysis is a cultural phenomenon which has resulted in a new way of classifying human experience based on this way of understanding. End of quotation. As examples, he gives law, religion, and how much everyday life has been influenced by psychoanalytical terms such as repression, frustration, or Freudian slip. Quotation, these days not even high or low literature could be imagined without psychoanalysis. The media of mass communication are full of material coming from this source. End of quotation. In the sense of Alfred Schütz, psychoanalysis belongs to the world of matter-of-course facts. It counts among those claims concerning the essence of reality which any mentally sane in any society takes as a matter of course. End of quotation. For example, educated Americans assume that they have an unconscious influencing their moods and behavior. By help of psychoanalytical theory, they observe themselves and interpret their own behavior. In this context, we must note, as Berger explains, that psychoanalysis does not only describe psychic reality, but also defines and creates it. Its new language of self-description knows many neologisms, such as oral, anal, or phallic for the description of steps of psychic development, and redefines familiar terms like ego ideal or inhibition. quotation Zaretsky, this way many became able to understand their experiences as creations of their own selves, thus contributing to a process of inner development which is the only secure foundation of progress. End of quotation. The great success of the psychoanalytical model is due to the fact that industrial society has created social structures and psychic realities which are appropriate to it. As a consequence, the distinction between the public and the private sphere resulted in a split between the public and the private self. Often the individual is not sure who she is after all. This makes identity crisis inevitable. In the pluralized modern society, the individual, him, herself, is responsible for stabilizing his/her personal identity, as Thomas Luckmann notes in his considerations on social psychology. This task becomes a subjective, in a way, a private matter. Psychoanalysis may be helpful with the search for the true self in the private sphere, thus building and consolidating identity. According to Zaretsky, this way it creates a new object, personal experience. Furthermore, institutionalized psychologism in the public sphere of economic and political bureaucracies helps with making them more efficient. Berger summarizes. This way, the symbols of psychologism become, in a truly Durkheimian sense, collective ideas bridging the gap between private and public life, and this within a cultural environment which has become extremely poor of overarching symbols. A number of studies carry on Berger's knowledge sociological consideration, thus developing them further. Of significance is most of all the systematic comprehensive work Saving the Modern Soul, Therapy, Emotions in the Culture of Self-Help by Eva Illush, who, however, does not at all mention Berger's pioneering study. She points out that both the therapeutic discourse and the American popular culture have spread around the world. The therapeutic discourse has permeated the seemingly impermeable spheres of modernity, has blurred its borders, and has this way become one of the most important codes for giving expression to the self, for shaping and guiding it. In the sense of Karin Knorr-Cetina, psychologic and therapeutic knowledge becomes constitutive for social relations. Right from the beginning, in the United States, cultural industries are crucial for its spread. Already in the 1920s, psychotherapists addressed the wide audience and made insecurities, crises, and fears a topic of discussion. They had developed a kind of advice literature which still today is an influential cultural industry because it offers knowledge which helps with understanding one's own self and one's relation to others. Its vocabulary helps with creating and shaping one's own self. Also, advertisement at an early stage made use of psychoanalytical knowledge to connect products to unconscious desires and fantasies, thus influencing the consumers. The Psychology of Advertising by W.D. Scott was published as early as in 1908. Edward Bernays, a nephew of Freud, was the founder of public relations work in the United States. In his opinion, advertisement was supposed to break the resistance of consumers. Consumption goods were said to be capable of discovering and unfolding hidden dimensions of the self. However, crucial for the communication of psychoanalytical knowledge is the film, most of all the Hollywood film, which since the late 1910s became much important for consumption society. The power of the unconscious, the meaning of dreams, and the role of therapy became important topics. To illustrate this in the following, I will at first look at the representation of psychoanalysis in Hollywood films and then in more recent TV series. I selected some outstanding examples. Part 2, Psychoanalysts in the Hollywood film. Both cinema and psychoanalysis origin from the late 19th century. In 1895, the Lumiere brothers showed their first films in Paris. In that same year, Freud published his project for scientific psychology. Soon, both these European inventions reached the United States. Both film and psychoanalysis make us see the world in a way previously unknown to us. Whereas in the silent film, the outer appearance of man becomes visible again by help of a medium, such as the beauty of a face, psychoanalysis makes man's rooting in language a topic. Experience modernity is characterized by contingency, superficiality, and confusion. Film and psychoanalysis, on the other hand, strive for unveiling the secrets of being in the world. Not only psychoanalysis, but also cinema are said to have therapeutic effects. Well known is Felix Guattari's dictum of the cinema being the couch for the poor, who cannot afford a psychoanalyst. At an early stage, Hollywood films presented dream sequences such as in Dream of a Rabid Fiend, 1906 by Edward S. Porter, or in When the Clouds Roll By, 1919 by Victor Fleming. Previous to World War I, however, Hollywood productions were rather conservative and did not put the dominating moral order into question. Accordingly, one did not make extensive use of psychoanalytical knowledge. Then, however, from the 1920s on, psychoanalysis conquered the film. In 1924, Hollywood producer Samuel Goldwyn offered Sigmund Freud $100,000 for his contribution to a really big love story, which was rejected by Freud, however. Then in 1926, J.W. Pabst in Germany made the Goldwyn-produced film Secrets of a Soul under the guidance of leading psychoanalysts. The film presents and interprets a trauma in order of providing a popular insight into psychoanalytic theory and practice. In those days, however, Hollywood cinema did not really distinguish between therapists, hypnotizers, and other specialists in the psyche. Gabbard and Gabbard even speak of a de-medicalizing of psychiatry in hundreds of films made during the early period of the cinema. Only since the 1930s, psychiatrists or psychoanalysts appeared in films more often, these films often being based on theater plays. For example, in Blind Alley, 1939, Ralph Bellamy acts as a character who is both a professor and a psychoanalyst. On the one hand, he represents the theoretical avant-garde by putting the narrow-minded ideas of his students in question and being a rational humanist, supporting tolerance and pluralism. On the other hand, however, with his European wife, he leads a traditional family life. He confronts an escaped killer who has got into his house with an interpretation of his dreams and the role of unconscious motivations, which finally leads to the intruder's death. Often the pipe-smoking actor looks like an oracle. The idealization of the psychoanalytical profession is continued in the 1940s, Spellbound by Alfred Hitchcock. Spellbound is the first Hollywood film focusing on the theory and practice of psychoanalysis. At that time, scriptwriter Ben Hecht and also David O. Selznick, like many other creative people in Hollywood, are psychoanalytically treated. Selznick's psychoanalyst contributed to the filming as an advisor. Dr. Constance Peterson, acted by Ingrid Bergman, works successfully at the Green Manors Hospital. She falls in love with a new colleague, acted by Gregory Peck, who, however, soon turns out to suffer from amnesia and to have only assumed the identity of Dr. Edwardes. His real name is John Ballantyne. He feels guilty of Edwardes' death. Soon he is suspected of murder. By help of her teacher analyst, Dr. Brülow, Dr. Peterson is able to unveil a heavy childhood trauma Ballantyne suffers from. In the course of a cathartic cure, he regains his memory and is able to liberate himself from his imaginary guilt. So we don't...
I'm not talking to you as one. But believe me, not what I say, but what I feel. The mind isn't everything. The heart can see deeper sometimes. The shock of a police investigation might ruin his chances for recovery, and I can save him.
But if he killed Dr. Edwards, how can you help him?
He didn't.
But if it turns out he did, which I'm good and certain it will.
It won't. You yourself taught me what Freud says. A man cannot do anything in amnesia that his real character wouldn't have done.
And how do you know what his real character is?
I know.
She knows. This is the way science goes backward. Who told you what he is? Freud? Or a crystal ball?
I couldn't feel this way toward a man who was bad, who had committed murder. I couldn't feel this pain for someone who was evil.
You are 20 times crazier than him. She couldn't love him if he was no good. This is baby talk, nothing else. What do you want I should do?
Give me time to treat him and cure him before the police find him and shock him into an incurable condition.
This could take a year.
Oh, no.
All right, a half a year? We should sit and hide for a half a year, waiting to find out if he's going to cut your throat, my throat, and set fire to the house. Oh, my dear girl. Even to a woman in love, such a situation must seem a little unreasonable.
Just a few more days, Alex, before you turn him over. Just a few more days, and then if I can't do anything, if we both can't, well, then you can call the police. You're not hiding a criminal. There is no evidence against him except his own guilt fantasies. He's wanted only as a possible witness as to what happened to Dr. Edwards. Well, in his present condition, he could tell the police nothing. Don't you see you're doing nothing against the law? We're helping them by investigating the patient as doctors. Doctors who want the truth even more than they do.
All right.
You'll wait.
Go make me coffee. I'll pretend to myself I'm acting sensible for a few days.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll make you coffee with an egg in it.
Who are you?
I'm Dr. Bruloff.
Bruloff. Oh, yeah, that's right.
At one passage of the film, experienced and famous Dr. Bruloff says, "Women make the best psychoanalysts until they fall in love. Then they make the best patients." Hitchcock in Spellbound, on the other hand, presents the opposite. The male position and its cold analytical ratio fail completely. Dr. Peterson, however, is successful precisely because she follows her intuition of a woman in love. That is why she is superior to the male psychiatrist in Detectives. Accordingly, Veronica Rales is of the opinion Spellbound takes the side of those being in love, thus keeping not at last the promise it has given the cinema. Going to the cinema may, like psychoanalysis, serve for learning about oneself, however only if one becomes unrestrainedly committed to the other of reason. Geht's weiter?
Constance told you.
Oh, nobody told me. If I don't know a patient with amnesia when I see one, what? Or mother?
No.
Wife or sweetheart?
No.
Don't fight me. I'm going to help you if I can. I'm going to be your father image. I want you to look on me like your father. Trust me, lean on me. This is a shortcut, but we haven't much time.
All right, go ahead. I'm leaning.
Maybe you got something you want to tell me? A single thought? A few words in the corner of your head? Go on, talk to me. Whatever comes into your head, just say what it is.
There's nothing.
Maybe you dreamt something.
Yeah.
What did you dream?
I don't believe in dreams that Freud stuffs a lot of hooey.
Oh, you are a fine one to talk. You got amnesia and you got a guilt complex. And you don't know if you're coming or going from someplace. But Freud is hooey. This you know. A wise guy.
You don't like me, Papa.
Do you want I should help you or not?
I'm sorry.
I explained to you about dreams, so you don't think it is hooey. The secrets of who you are and what has made you run away from yourself, all these secrets are buried in your brain. But you don't want to look at them. The human being very often doesn't want to know the truth about himself because he thinks it will make him sick. So he makes himself sicker, trying to forget. You follow this?
Oh, how do you feel?
Ah, coffee.
Awful.
The patient is going to tell us what he dreamt.
Oh, fine. I'll take notes. I'll get my glasses.
Now, here's where dreams come in. They tell you what you are trying to hide. But they tell it to you all mixed up like pieces of a puzzle that don't fit. The problem of the analyst is to examine this puzzle and put the pieces together in the right place and find out what the devil you are trying to say to yourself.
Let's see. I kept thinking while I was dreaming that all this meant something. That there was some other meaning in it that I ought to find out.
We'll find out.
I can't make out just what sort of a place it was. It seemed to be a gambling house. But there weren't any walls, just a lot of curtains with eyes painted on them. A man was walking around with a large pair of scissors cutting all the drapes in half. And then a girl came in with hardly anything on and started walking around the gambling room, kissing everybody. She came to my table first.
Did you recognize this kissing bug?
Well, I'm afraid she looked a little like Constance.
Uh-huh. This is plain, ordinary, wishful dreaming. Go on.
Well, I was sitting there playing cards with a man who had a beard. I was dealing to him. I turned up a 7 of clubs. He said, that makes 21. I win. When he turned up his cards, they were blank. Just then, the proprietor came in and accused him of cheating. The proprietor yelled, this is my place, and if I catch you cheating again, I'll fix you. I'm sorry about that kissing bug.
I'm glad you didn't dream of me as an egg beater, as one of my patients did.
Why, what would that mean?
Never mind.
Well, does it make any sense to you what I dreamed?
Not yet. You were trying to tell yourself something. What it is, we'll figure out later.
There's a lot more to it.
Go on and try to recall the details. The more cockeyed, the better for the scientific side of it.
He was leaning over the sloping roof of a high building. It was the man with the beard. I yelled at him to watch out. Then he went over, slowly, with his feet in the air. And then I saw the proprietor again, the man in the mask. He was hiding behind a tall chimney, and he had a small wheel in his hand. I saw him drop the...
How much the film is obliged to psychoanalytical theory and practice is made obvious by a statement in the opening credits. Our story deals with psychoanalysis, the method by which modern science treats the emotional problems of the sane. The analyst seeks only to induce the patient to talk about his hidden problems, to open the locked doors of his mind. Once the complexes that have been disturbing the patient are uncovered and interpreted, the illness and confusion disappear, and the evils of unreason are driven from the human soul. However, Spellbound does not keep the promise. It is less the talking cure, which is shortly presented, but rather Dr. Peterson's work as a detective, which makes her find the solution. In an interview with François Truffaut, Hitchcock admits that Spellbound is just another manhunt story wrapped in pseudo-psychoanalysis. Also in Nightmare Alley from 1947, a very important film noir, psychoanalysis is rather an accessory. Criminal machinations are predominant. Dr. Lilith Ritter, as a ruthless and criminal psychoanalyst, represents a femme fatale who is neither in love nor shows compassion, but manipulates and blackmails the main character, Stanton Carlyle, acted by Tyrone Powers. At the beginning of the film, in a conversation between the two, psychoanalysis is described as a kind of detective work. Also in Dark Mirror by Robert Siodmak, another film noir, the work of the psychoanalyst is similar to that of the detective. However, these films have in common that they have appropriated psychoanalysis in an intelligent and refined way as far as the conventions of popular film allow for this. Indeed, in the 1940s and earlier, there are also films which are less sophisticated and sometimes even critical towards psychoanalysis. Still in the 1950s, Hollywood continued its ambivalent attitude towards psychoanalysis. On the one hand, it was idealized. On the other, it was just exploited as a theme in order of telling entertaining stories. The authors come to the Gabbard and Gabbard, in her study, come to the conclusion that in none of these films, psychoanalysis is seriously practiced. The practice of psychoanalysis is much too complex for a Hollywood film to actually focus on it. When in the late 1950s and early 60s, we find most of all idealizing representations of psychoanalysis, which was also more and more accepted by society. Between 1957 and 1963, more than 25 films were made presenting competent, caring, and likable psychoanalysts. Psychoanalysis, which in the United States had now made the turn towards ego psychology, was ever less perceived as a modernist avant-garde movement by the public, but as an accepted professional practice in the context of bureaucratically organized medical or psychological institutions which found expression by the films. In this golden age, psychoanalysts appear as competent healers and righteous experts. Here, David and Lisa, 1962, must be emphasized, a film which was made independently of the studio system. It demonstrates that individual pathologies may be due to family circumstances. Dr. Swinford, acted by Howard Da Silva, who treats his patients compassionately and mostly avoids lingo, is an experienced psychotherapist offering competent help and hope. Even in case of heavy emotional transference, he stays calm. Active psychoanalysts praised the films for his realistic presentation of psychoanalytic treatment. Consequently, how to deal with counter-transference was the topic of Pressure Point, 1962. Sidney Poitier acts as a black psychiatrist who is attacked and insulted in a racist manner by the white patient during therapy. For the sake of his patient's therapeutic needs, he succeeds with staying calm and suppressing his personal feelings. Here, these two examples may suffice for demonstrating how in those days one believed in and idealized the character of the psychoanalyst. True, at that time there were also films putting this image in question, although this was done subtly. Once again, films by Alfred Hitchcock, such as Vertigo, 1958, and Psycho, 1960, are prominent in this context. At first sight, psychoanalysis is established as a positive interpretive frame. However, when Hitchcock gives reason to doubt that he was really serious with this, for example, Dr. Richmond's rational and comprehensive explanations at the end of Psycho seem to be little helpful after all those horrible and shaking emotions the audience has experienced when watching the film. Insofar, this film also marks a transition. From then on, psychoanalysis and psychiatry are presented in a less positive and idealizing way. This way, Hollywood reacted to the cultural revolutions and the radical criticisms of institutions starting in the 1960s. This may be well demonstrated by Dress to Kill by Brian De Palma, who is often called an epigone of Hitchcock. Dr. Richmond in Psycho is an authority figure announcing the knowledge of psychoanalysis-oriented psychiatry. In De Palma's film, the psychoanalyst Dr. Elliot, acted by Michael Caine, is a psychotic killer, suffering from a multiple personality disorder. As an ironic reference to Psycho, also at the end of his film, a psychoanalyst appears at the police station who, however, is little convincing when trying to explain Elliot's behavior. In the 2 decades separating these films from each other, most Hollywood films presented a negative image of psychoanalysis. No longer psychoanalysts are considered helpers, being able to remove obstacles which restrict the individual's liberty and the unfolding of its own self. Rather, they are considered agents of social control. In films such as A Fine Madness, 1966, by Irving Kershner, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, 1975, by Milos Forman, which are based on novels from the early 60s, psychoanalysts or psychiatry are actually attacked and vehemently put in question. Psychiatry becomes a place of repression, where vital, unorthodox outsiders, loners, and visionaries are brutally sedated. At that time, also psychiatrists such as Ronald D. Lang and David Cooper were of this opinion. Woody Allen's films criticize psychoanalysis in an ironic way. Often, Allen acts as a disillusioned patient looking for the meaning of life. Psychoanalysis is not capable of keeping its promise of creating happiness and fulfillment by removing personal problems. Accordingly, the character Allen acts in Hannah and Her Sisters, 1986, states laconically, "I was in analysis for years. Nothing happened. My analyst got so frustrated, the poor guy, that he put in a salad bar." Similar to the films by Paul Mazursky, what we find in Allen's films is not a complete rejection of psychoanalysis, but a deeply rooted ambivalence resulting in humorous and ironic views. In Sidney Lumet's Equus, 1977, based on a successful play by Peter Shaffer, we encounter a psychoanalyst acted by Richard Burton, who gives expression to his desperation and regret about being supposed to lead his young patient, who in the course of an orgiastic ritual has blinded horses, back to normality. He succeeds, however. He thus destroys the boy's passion and contact to the holy in the sense of Bataille. These examples make obvious how much Hollywood films were influenced by the vehement criticism of psychoanalysis and psychiatry in those days. In the context of the anti-psychiatry movement, the practices of the former are considered ways of social repression. When, however, by ordinary people, 1980, Robert Redford made a film which started a counter-movement again. Dr. Berger, acted by Judd Hirsch, who is presented as a likable, caring, and compassionate person, succeeds with a cathartic cure for his patient Conrad Jarrett, acted by Timothy Hutton, in the course of which the latter regains his memory of a traumatic boat accident, as a result of which he is finally cured.
Oh, good. You're here. All right,
Something happened.
Just wait. Just hold on a minute.
I
Just wait. Let me get inside here.
Shit. You'd think they would assume there'd be an emergency now and then. No, don't take it off. Just sit down.
Something happened.
What?
It's
what?
God. I need something.
What do you need? Tell me.
It just keeps coming, and I can't make it stop.
Don't try.
Come on, I gotta get off the hook. I gotta get off the hook.
For what?
For what I did.
What did you do?
For what I did to him.
What did you do?
It's something. Don't you see? It's gotta be somebody's fault, or there ain't no goddamn point.
Point? What point? It happened.
No, it ain't it. No, I don't mean that. It's Bucky, I didn't mean it. Bucky, I didn't mean it. Bucky.
I know that. It wasn't your fault.
But it was. You said get the cell down, and I couldn't. It jammed, and then the halyard jammed, and I couldn't. Goddamn halyard jammed, and then you're sitting, you're screwing around until it's too late to do anything, and I'm supposed to take care of it. I'm supposed to take care of it.
And that wasn't fair, was it?
No. And then you say, hang on, and then you let go. Why'd you let go?
Because I got tired.
Yeah? Well, screw you, you jerk!
Since the 1980s in Hollywood, the myth of reconciliation has become important again. Once again, therapy has the function of adjusting and integrating without being criticized for this. These examples show that for the cultural industry of Hollywood, psychoanalysis has always been of significance. Most of all, in the early days, it was not about an adequate presentation of psychoanalytic knowledge and therapeutic cure. For Hollywood, always those narration patterns and myths are essential, which have proven to be commercially successful. This is why often analysts are presented as detectives and are considered an extension of the genre of the crime film. Nevertheless, also, these films, as well as those doing more justice to psychoanalysis, have raised and established expectations and images. Like with advertisement, these processes are often unconscious. Gabbard and Gabbard state in her study, psychiatric patients come to the consulting room with expectations of how a psychiatrist should behave based on what they see in movies. End of quotation. The reception of films influences and organizes experience. This way, there develops a cultural knowledge of the therapeutic discourse, which then, during and after psychoanalytic treatment, may be modified and extended. This way, the cultural industry of Hollywood has considerably contributed to making psychoanalysis popular. The question of how authentic these representations are is only secondary. Psychoanalysis in quality TV. As a conclusion, I would like to have a look at how psychoanalysis is represented in so-called quality TV. This new kind of television, which has developed in the United States in the context of pay TV, does not address a mass audience, but special audiences. The makers are granted much leeway when it comes to working out their series. Other than in Hollywood, they are supposed to precisely not repeat proven formulas and stereotypes, but to work out new, unique worlds. These are characterized by complex and surprising plots, complicated characters, and often a degree of realism, as previously it was only found in the bourgeois novel. As in most cases, the plot develops over several seasons. There's enough time for detailed and authentic representations of social milieus and practices. Two examples are particularly worth mentioning in our context. On the one hand, there's Tony Soprano, acted by James Gandolfini, the mafia boss in The Sopranos, who seeks treatment by a psychoanalyst for his panic attacks and anxiety states. During the sessions at Dr. Melfi's, Tony achieves insights and moments of clarity which are helpful for him and serve as a guiding basis for his actions. Processes of transference and countertransference are presented realistically and in much detail. Dr. Melfi is not the only representative of her trait in this series. Also, Tony's wife, Carmela, and his son seek help by therapists. Dr. Melfi discusses her countertransferences with her teacher analyst Elliot Kupferberg, played by Peter Bogdanovich. The therapeutic sessions extend the narrative universe of the series. They create moments of self-observation and reflection, as well as of getting distance from the remaining plot. The therapeutic processes are presented impressively, making The Sopranos the predecessor of another HBO-produced series in treatment, 2008 to 2010. This series, consisting of 3 seasons, is the preliminary peak of presenting psychoanalytic knowledge as adequately as ever possible in the context of a product of the cultural industry. It is based on the Israeli TV series B'Tipul, which in the meantime has been remade and recreated in a number of other countries. Thus, we have here a global product presenting the psychotherapeutic discourse on a worldwide scale. This minimalist series focuses on therapeutic sessions. Their course is changed into a demanding and very condensed dramaturgy. The therapeutic setting is almost the same as the cinematic space and the cinematic time. In the first season, Paul Weston, acted by Gabriel Byrne, is visited by 5 patients, respectively on the first 4 days of the week. 2 of the patients undergo couple therapy. On Fridays, he is himself under supervision by his former teacher analyst to analyze and cope with his sometimes heavy emotions of countertransference. As the series is able to take much time for extensively presenting the patients and also the therapist's problems by way of words, facial expressions, and body language, there develops a complex and nuanced image of the therapeutic process. The unlimited intention expected by the patients, the changing between closeness and distance, which makes the therapeutic relationships, feelings of transference, the fight for remembering, and the ways of self-deception are depicted minute by minute and in much detail.
So, Jesse, what happened with the...
He got beat up at school.
Jesse?
Somebody beat the shit out of me.
So, would you like to tell me about it?
Not particularly.
He was jumped in the men's bathroom of the Whitney Museum while they were on a class trip by some rich kid who doesn't even go to their school.
Marissa? Paul has something to tell you.
Is it Nate?
My art class took a trip to the Whitney, and Nate lives like right across the street, right on 75th, so I just thought I'd call him and leave him a message, you know, because he's been leaving me so many lately, and I don't know. He picked up. Fucker didn't have school that day, and he was like, "Where are you?" And I was like, "At the Whitney," and he was like, "Meet me in the men's room on the 3rd floor," and I was like, "Fine," because I didn't want to go back to class and spend the morning staring at those George O'Keeffe flower vaginas. Those things give me the creeps. She doesn't even know who George O'Keeffe is. So anyway, we like go into one of the stalls and we're kissing. And he's like, "You look hot." And I'm like, "Then suck my dick." What? So he gets down on his knees, which I have to admit is like the hottest thing that's ever happened to me. And I'm like rock hard, and all of a sudden he starts talking. "I've been thinking about you. I've missed you. I've been trying to call your house." And I'm like, not about to have this conversation. So I'm just like, "Yeah, well, I didn't get those messages because we're living in a shelter for the time being." And he like looks at me like he doesn't believe me. And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Nothing." And then he tries to suck my dick, but he can't because I've lost my fucking boner. So I like start to pull up my pants, and he's like, "What the fuck just happened?" And I'm like, "You can't suck dick for shit." And that's when he hit me. And he like just kept hitting me until the guards came in and took him off me. It felt kind of good, actually.
You'll only make...
Don't touch me.
If I may, Doctor, I'm worried the school overreacted because Jesse is, well...
Gay?
Yes.
Why can't you say the word?
I just wonder if he was straight and got caught fighting with another boy. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do. I think it's a valid point.
No, it's not. It's a ridiculous point. I was fighting. Fighting is illegal. You get suspended for fighting.
But you weren't fighting so much, darling, as being
Did you listen to
abused
a word
by this older, bigger... I don't care.
I told him to suck my dick.
I don't care if you told him to go paddle a duck. Words are one thing. Physical violence is something very different.
Paddle duck.
Come on, Jesse.
No, that's good. I'll have to remember that one. God, you are sick, Marissa.
I'm sick. I'm not the one who...
Certainly, due to being a crazy documentary, this series, as well as its Israeli model, is for the time being the most appropriate depiction of psychoanalysis-oriented psychotherapy. I come to a conclusion. Right from the beginning, films and TV series have essentially contributed to the development of a therapeutic culture. The ideas and concepts of psychoanalysis have been presented by products of the cultural industry, although often in a distorted way. By way of media representation, therapeutic narrations of the self have been spread and made popular. Not at last, this is the reason why these days therapy belongs to the world of the matters of course. It is more than just a way of treatment. It is also an available cultural frame by way of which we consider ourselves as well as our personal relationships. Like therapy itself, also its representations by film and most of all in TV series may be helpful for making our lives meaningful as well as for finding and realizing new options. Thank you very much.